Hello, I'm Todd Smith, and this is your Appellate Tip of the Week. This week's tip is use online dockets as a resource. Texas appellate court websites contain a lot of useful information, and we will address some specific features of these websites in future videos. Today's focus, though, is an online docket in your specific case. And so I'm going to pull up a few examples to show and to demonstrate some of the useful things about these online dockets and the reason why I'm posting this as its own video. So this is the Supreme Court website, and one thing to know kind of early on is this can be a pretty useful hub for just accessing the Texas appellate court system and the websites in general. You can see a lot of the useful links copied here on the side. And one thing that I like to do is just instead of bookmarking all of the different Court of Appeals pages, I bookmark the Supreme Court page here, and then I will use this drop-down menu to access other courts. And it's very simple to do and makes it super easy to access without clogging up my bookmarks. But what I'm here to show you for today is these online dockets. And so anytime that there's an appeal docketed in any court that's covered on these websites, you can access information about that case through that docket. So let's say I'm going to go in the Third Court of Appeals, and I'm going to search for a case. And let's search for, I know one that's pretty new, newly docketed. It happens to be one of my cases. And so this is basically the online docket for this particular appeal. And you can see there's a place for briefs, a place for case events, calendars, the identity of the parties, the counsel are listed there, and then information also about the trial court. A lot of this information is gathered when the case is first docketed, either through notice of appeal or through the docketing statement that is the administrative tool the clerk's office uses to check this information and get it entered into the system. So you can see that there hasn't been much happen in this case yet. We've had a notice of appeal filed. The fee was paid for that. The docketing statement was filed, so you can guess that that's probably where a lot of this information came from. Clerk's record has been filed in this case, and then there's been new counsel has appeared on behalf of one of the parties. So what you would see if this case were a little farther along is a notation where the reporter's record had been filed, briefs had been filed, rulings on motions, and so forth. This is just one example, but we have some other ones. I've pulled up some other cases that were developed a little further to show the different types of events that can show up here. So here's another case that's a little farther along. Here we do have the clerk's record filed, and I believe the reporter's record was filed. And yes, so we had originally the brief had been scheduled as due in this case once the record had been filed. But what you see has happened here is that the court has issued an abatement order, which you can download by clicking on this link, and the court has referred the case to mediation. So you get a little more flavor just based on the greater depth of the number of case events from looking at this, what's going on in the case. You can click on this link and it will download the order for you. You can see, you can click on this link and it will download the notification that the clerk's record was filed. You won't be able to get the record itself through this link. This is covered in a separate video where I talk about the attorney portal. But that's another example. And I'll give you one more that I think even goes farther. This is a case in which the briefs have been filed and the matter is ready to be disposed. And it's in the Third Court of Appeals. You can kind of track the history of the case just by looking at the docket. You can see where the briefs have been filed, and if you wanted to download any one of these briefs, you could do so by clicking on that link. Actually, you've got a summary section up here with just appellate briefs where you could get at the briefs in this specific case if you wanted to. So the docket, the nice thing about these online dockets is that they show pretty much every case event and they link to most of the key documents. As I say, the record is about the only thing that you can't get going through these publicly available websites. And so you really can access a lot of information. If it's your case, you should be on the lookout for the court's online docket, and it's a good idea to monitor it and double check it occasionally. And it's another kind of a backstop in terms of how you manage your case. You know, if you need to verify that information, the information in your files is correct, it's a good idea to go and look at these sites just to verify. And if you miss downloading a certain document, you may be able to go back and get it here. It's just a good thing to know that these exist. And I find that some trial lawyers, because they don't practice in appellate courts regularly, may not know about the court websites, the appellate court websites, and may not appreciate just the useful information that they provide. In fact, one other little tidbit that you will see, it's not going to be shown here because this case has already been fully briefed, but if you want a way to double check your calculation of when your brief is due, for example, briefs are typically due 30 days after the record is filed. You can calculate that out yourself, and that's what the rules of appellate procedure assume that you're going to do. But these sites also calculate that deadline, and so if you want to check yourself, often what you'll be able to do is pull up the site, and there'll be a notation on the calendar section here about when the brief is due. Something else that I find handy, you will occasionally learn bits of information on these sites that hasn't been released to the public yet. For example, you may find out by looking at the calendars that oral argument has been denied in your case, even though you won't necessarily get an order from the court or any kind of official notice from the court until it actually sets a submission date. So if you monitor the online dockets, and we'll cover in a separate video the best way to do that, then you can get information that's not directly provided to you by the courts and kind of get a feel for what's going on in the case and how it's progressing through the appellate system. That's it for this week's tip. We'll see you next time.